Welcome. My name is Jonathan Sarna. I'm the director of the Schusterman Center for Israel Studies here at Brandeis, and it is really my great pleasure to welcome you to our first ever online exhibition entitled The Zionist Phantom. Today, we are launching this exhibition, which you can view on your screens, and we also have the great pleasure of hearing from the artist, Professor Dana Arieli, who is with us from Israel, and also from our curator, Dr. Rotem Rozental, who is with us from Burbank. I want to thank the hardworking staff of our own Schusterman Center for going above and beyond the call of duty in making this exhibit a reality. The software didn't always behave, but they whipped it into shape, as you'll see. And I really want to thank Dana and Rotem for really their extraordinary work. It is certainly our hope that in the future we can offer many more cultural programs of this sort to our audience. A word about our speakers. Dana Arieli is professor of history and a photographer based in Jerusalem. She's associate professor at the design faculty in Holon Institute of Technology in Israel. Her PhD is from the Hebrew University. She focuses in her work on the interrelations between art and politics. Dr. Rotem Rozental is Chief Curator, Senior Director of Arts and Culture at American Jewish University. She's an Israeli photo historian, a scholar, consultant, lecturer, and mother. Not necessarily in that order. She's published in all of the right publications, and it has been a pleasure working with her. Now, in a couple of minutes, we will hear directly from Dana and Rotem, and you will then be able to ask them questions through the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Um, and Dr. Shana Weiss, our associate director, will be handling those questions after the presentation. Note that you can also adjust the transcription feature likewise at the bottom of your screen. But before we turn to Dana and Rotem, it is my pleasure, really a privilege to be able to introduce the still new Consul General of Israel in New England, our good friend, Ambassador Meron Reuven. Um, the ambassador brought to New England 3 decades of experience in Israel's diplomatic corps, most recently as its chief of state protocol. And in a short time, in COVID time here in Boston, he has proved himself to be a great supporter of Israeli cultural programs in the area, and he's also become a good friend. So let me thank you, Ambassador, on behalf of the Schusterman Center, and invite you to say a few words. Ambassador Reuven.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon to those in Israel. Boker Tov, Tzoraim Tovim. It's an honor to be joining you on this festive event, which the Israeli consulate is proud to co-sponsor. I would like to congratulate the Schusterman Center on their very first virtual exhibition. And thank you very much, Professor Sarna, for the introduction and for representing the diversity and complexity of Israeli society through the curriculum and programming that you have at the Center for Israeli Studies. It's really wonderful. I'd also like to thank Dr. Shana Weiss for her hard work putting up this wonderful project together. And thank you to Anna Simpson, to Rai Singer, and Karen Goldblatt at the Schusterman Center, and Ingrid Shore with the Leonard Bernstein Festival of the Arts. And finally, I'd like to extend my gratitude to Professor Dana Arieli for the great photography of Israeli landscapes from the Golan Heights and Rabin Square to Yad Mordechai and Mount Herzl, and to Dr. Rotem Rozental for curating this mesmerizing collection of deserted spaces. We look forward in hosting you here in New England for a physical exhibition and meeting you in person. Until then, I invite all the viewers to browse through the Zionist phantom and enjoy our beautiful country from afar. Thank you. Toda rabah. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone. So thank you so much for this incredibly warm welcome. Dana and I are just sitting here and we're overwhelmed with all the incredible words that we're hearing from everyone this morning. And I do want to say that I want to thank, I know we've heard a lot of thank yous, but everybody that are here today with us should really know how grateful we are to the team at Brandeis for making this incredible project happen. They were working tediously behind the scenes to make sure that this exhibition gets the space that it needs. And they were working day and night in order to make that happen. And I don't take that lightly. And I know that Dana does not either. So I want to thank everybody at Brandeis, Shana Weiss and Risa Singer and Karen Goodblatt, and of course, Professor Jonathan Sarna, and also Anna Simpson for really all of their efforts around this. And of course, the Leonard Bernstein Festival of Creative Arts for hosting us today, and specifically Ingrid Shore for working with us around this. And lastly, I want to thank each and every one of you that have joined us today in any time zone. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend this hour with us and for coming here into this space to hear more about Dana's incredible work. I was absolutely thrilled that I have had the opportunity to join forces with Professor Dana Arieli, who is a leading artist and scholar whose work excavates personal and collective traumas, as well as the national structures of memory. So I'm so happy to share this with everybody today. And I want to thank everybody that have joined us. And as you could see in the chat, please share your questions with us throughout, and we will take them at the end. So now we're going to be talking a little bit about Dana's work and also share some materials from the exhibition. But of course, I encourage everybody to log into the exhibition website and experience it by yourselves. And also we plugged another link in the chat, which is a link to Dana's website, the Zionist.Phantoms website, where you can actively participate in this project and contribute your own text to it. And you will also have the opportunity to do this tomorrow with Dana in a workshop that we'll say something more about later on. So Dana, hi.
Yes, Rotem. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, because you did, of course, thank everybody else, but I wish to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because this was a great experience and I enjoyed every single moment. And also I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Yuda but I forgot the second name now, in a moment. Too excited.
Well, of course, it's an exciting morning. I mean,
Professor Yuda Reinhardt.
There you
because
go.
he was the one to introduce me. He was the one to introduce me to this wonderful center, and from Mandel, of course, from Mandel Institute in Jerusalem. And this is how it all happened. So, okay, now I'm ready.
Wonderful. So I want us to begin by thinking about something that is not a clear choice at all, I think, which is you as a political scientist, as a scholar, choosing to pick up a camera and start using it within your scholarly research. And I think it's where we should begin, because I don't think it's a clear choice. I don't think it's obvious that a political scientist, probably we have some of them with us here in the in the event today. I think they're all probably nodding right now. Like, as a political scientist, you would not necessarily pick up a camera and start turning it to your subjects of research, but it's a conscious choice that you have done. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that, because I think this is where this project really begins.
Okay, that's a wonderful way to start. I think the reason why I chose to bring camera in, basically take camera into my scholarly research, was in the intention to explore other layers of interpretation while I use it. I knew that once it will be part of the process, the materials that I was always working on will achieve some other dimensions. And for me, it was really important because my research until that point in time was focused on one of the most scariest phenomena in the history of the 20th century, namely, of course, National Socialism. Mm-hmm. And I was dealing with the interrelations between culture and politics, mainly in Nazi Germany. But I can remember very vividly that at some point in time, I thought that maybe through creation, I might be able to reach some kind of a closure. Taking photos for me was like a process of self-therapy, but not self-therapy documentary, as Paul Arthur writes, but self-therapy through photography. And this was basically part of my motivation when I embarked on the first phantom journey. This was in Germany in 2009, and it was supposed to be a single journey. You know, that will free me from all the demons, from all the phantoms, but this never happened. The exact opposite happened. And after the first journey, the only thing I could think about was, when do I go back and do another one?
So this was in a little over 10 years ago when you took your first phantom venture into Germany. And here we're seeing two moments from the earlier phantom journey in 2009 in Berlin and the later journey in 2014. So before we dive into these moments, I'm wondering, so you were hoping to find some sort of a closure. Was there anything else that you were hoping to find in the sites themselves?
Peace of mind? No, I'm joking. You can't find a peace of mind in a bunker. But I think my point of view as a historian was always, inductive. So I think I was hoping to gather data and to gather material in a way that could not be done in an archive, because nothing can compare, with the process of gathering data from an actual scene. I was always driven to field research. I was always taken by documents. So it made sense for me to document my journeys with camera. When I started working on the Phantoms project, this is, as you mentioned, almost a decade ago, I was also studying photography in Bezalel, Academy of Art and Design. And it was therefore completely logical to take photos. I was really excited because I think I understood that I'm finally about to meet, all these Nazi buildings that I was teaching for ages. And taking photo was meant to ensure, this other dimension, which I believed will contribute a lot to my research.
Yeah.
So so it was this first journey that I was searching at the beginning. I was searching for Nazi architecture, the relics of architecture, design, arts. But I was also searching for objects, very tiny objects, and the smallest object that I was searching for was a thimble with the engraving. By the way, a Nazi object with the engraving of the words Zig and Heil on each of the sides. And since I haven't found it yet, I'm still searching, you know. It's not so easy to find these objects today, at least not the original ones.
Did you have a sense of what you're getting into? Did you know what? So I'm trying to think about you taking the camera, going on the plane, and it's like a little over a decade ago. So it's not just going with your iPhone into the wilderness, into the urban wilderness. But there had to be some intention there. Like there had to be, I'm wondering what you were hoping to find in the sites themselves. Why did you choose those places? Why did you go there? What guided you into those areas?
Well, that's really a huge question, because you see, at least for that journey of 2009, I decided to devote a book. And of course, it was written at the beginning in Hebrew. Some parts of it were later translated, but you can imagine that if one journey was enough to come up with a whole book, then 35 journeys abroad is something, you know, that is running through my head now. How shall I answer you? Because it's really a huge question. But I think that I learned in this month of traveling all over Germany more than I did a lifetime before as a historian and in the archive. And I think photography certainly offered me this different perspective. I was introduced to, first of all, to the challenge of dimensions. You know, this is a monumental architecture. And this is, of course, not just the case in Germany. It's the case in any totalitarian system we can think of. It is really unbelievable how huge Nazi buildings are. I can even remember that once I had to go up on a hot air balloon to capture the whole facade of one building. This was, by the way, the former aviation ministry that was commissioned by Hermann Goering. This is the first Nazi building that was completed in 1936. And this air balloon was needed in order to have it in a single frame. Now, of course, I was debating with myself, because this is the type of things that Leni Riefenstahl did in her movies about the Nazis.
Yes.
So it's always this question of gestures and so on. But I can give you another example, for instance, if we'll talk, you know, maybe later on a bit about places like Nuremberg, which are much more complicated, because of course I knew that the project that was chiefly designed by Albert Speer was over 25 kilometers, sorry. But I think that only once you go through these places, you really understand the dimensions. Imagine that Nuremberg was supposed to be completed in 1961. So the Nazis intended to build for over 30 years. This gives you some intention to the question of the size. But I think the general thing that came out of it was the issues of culture memory. Not just the German culture memory, but the differences between culture memories in various places around the world. And of course, there is always the question of cultural responsibility. So in Germany, as I see it today, you know, in most of the German cities, the visitor is encountered and is getting information about the remains. So they're talking history, you know, history is present, no matter how difficult it is. It is evident, and it's not concealed, and it's not hidden. And if, for instance, you compare it to the situation in Israel, then obviously it's completely different. So
and we'll get to Israel in a moment. But I'm curious about, there's one thing that you said that I want to emphasize, because you've mentioned Leni Riefenstahl, and you've mentioned looking at those sites from the ground level, and looking at those sites from going up, literally up into the heavens. And what I'm thinking about is your photographic perspective, because I think it's an important topic that also comes into play in the exhibition. And we're going to be seeing together elements from the exhibition throughout this talk. And I also want to remind everybody, if you want to take a look at the exhibition while we're talking, there's a link to the exhibition in the chat. So talk to us about your photographic perspective. I want to introduce another concept into your photographic perspective that I think is crucial. And that's the phantoms, because you go into these sites by thinking through the perspective of the phantoms, meaning you're looking at those sites through what is not there. Say something about that. Say something about wanting to go into elements from Nazi architecture while thinking about phantoms, while traveling through Eastern Europe while thinking about phantoms.
Well, I think the best way to answer that would be that my field of research was throughout all the years, this interrelations between art and trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Now, trauma is in many cases invisible. I mean, this is not something that you can see. And also reflections about war, atrocities, pain, trauma, they're not tangible. This is not something that you can touch. We cannot see them. And the same is true, by the way, with the term phantom pains. Psychologists use it to depict the pains of amputees. This term is used by them to depict a sort of inner suffering, for somebody whose soul was wounded, was damaged. So this is not something you can depict. But on the other side, of course, I'm using documentary photography. So how abstract would it be? This is something that maybe we can talk about a bit later. Because there's always this paradox.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get more into your own personal experience with this, with the reasons that drove you to go into these sites. But I want to stay in the sites for just one more minute. And I'm wondering, could you take us there with you? What happens when you find yourself in these places? What happened with that person in Kiev? Take us with you. Like how does it look like when you get into a site with your camera?
Well, to be honest, it could be scary. It could be even very scary. It smells. And it gets worse when it's dark. but in a serious no, it could be a bit scary, I should tell you, because in many cases, entering such a bunker or entering a cemetery or entering, these are all places of dead people. I mean, it's hardly that I ever see people around myself. And if I see, of course, it makes an amazing oxymoron. But at the end of the day, in most of these journeys, the situation is me and the camera, plus if I have the chance of having somebody with me. Now, today I know how to identify such a site. For me, it's really simple today, because I remember the first time I was told by a German curator that when you see a huge tree, look behind it, because normally the relics would be hidden behind. And at the beginning, I wasn't sure, but this is true in Israel as much as it's true in Germany, in Ukraine, or in Japan. I'm still amazed to learn just a few weeks ago, as I was traveling to the south of Israel, there is the Arab village of Deir Sneed, that the Keren Kayemet of Israel planted some eucalyptus trees, so it won't be easy to follow the relics of the village. So this is a common thing that happens in many places around the world. But as I mentioned before, I mean, there's always the issue of the smell, it's like opening a very old closet and it smells. Yeah.
When all the demons all the ghosts and the phantoms starts to come out of that closet. But I imagine that the experience in different sites is different. And I imagine the relationships that you have with Germany are not the same as the relationship that you'll have with Poland. And I imagine that part is infused with a lot of your own personal experiences with that place. But I really appreciate it that you talk about the smell, because that is like the one thing that we can't get, not through the screen, but also not in the gallery space, right? When we're visiting an exhibition in person, the artist's own experience on site and smell, I think, is one of those liminal areas that we're never really exposed to as viewers. So thank you for bringing that up. So I'm curious about the archival perspective, right? We spoke about what happens when you're on site. We spoke about the decision to find the relics of dictatorships in the landscape. We spoke about how to gather those relics when you find them. what happens afterwards? How do you decide what to include in your records? How do you decide how to categorize those materials? What happens in your archive?
Well, now you see why I enjoyed myself so much, because it's not so often that I get to chat with such an intelligent person as you are, because these are really tremendous questions. Well, first of all, it's really hard to plan an archive when the project is still ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, I believe there are over 100,000 images. So it's like an ongoing mission. In the site, people are exposed to something anywhere between 400 to 500. So I have to be really brutal with myself. And at the same time, the project is developing all the time.
Yeah.
So every now and then I add new locations, I receive new comments almost every day. And you must understand that the contribution of the author, the various authors, is really crucial here, because they have the local knowledge and they can really add stuff that I would never be able to know. From my experience,
just to explain what you mean when you say that, on your website where photographs from the project are available, people can add their vision of the site, their memories of the site, their interpretation of the site. So when you say authors, you actually mean participants in the project that have been contributing actively since you started.
Exactly. So today I believe there are more than 1,000 comments in the sites, in both sites. But this is not the point. The point is that they can really add crucial information, because it's either they give their own testimony to what happened in this site, and sometimes it's really touching and really telling a lot. But to your question regarding the archive, you see, from my experience, when you start working on such what became a lifetime project, you have no clue exactly how it will evolve. And in my case, I realized throughout the journeys how fascinated I am with relics. And so I sat down and I wrote a wish list, of all the places that I would like to visit one day. And I can give you one example, like for instance, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were on my list for about 9 years. But it took me a very long time to realize that, partly because I wanted to have a Japanese partner who might be able to speak with me English fluently and share with me his concept. And it wasn't so easy, And as soon as I came back, I deleted from the site images that before were for me star images, But there's not enough space, and I don't want to overload the viewers. And you see, unfortunately, I'm saying ongoing because there's so many sites with bad history, so many places where atrocities happen that are really being added, on daily basis. So it's something that I can always add to. But just recently, and this was a very touching experience, just before COVID-19 spread all over the world, I visited Saloniki in Greece. And prior to my visit there, because I wanted to know more about the Jewish community in Greece and to understand what happened exactly throughout World War II, I discovered that there was a very old Jewish cemetery there that was ruined by intention by the Nazis. And some of their parts were taken into swimming pools in the most luxurious neighborhoods of Saloniki. So obviously, this was the end of my planned holiday in the sea, and he was another phantom, So it's endless. But the one good thing I can say about it, that I remember that I was once asked in an interview. I mean, she said, normal people would go to drink lavazza, and I understand that you go into
cemeteries,
yes,
and bunkers.
Yes, at least I combined them.
I mean, to each his own. Whatever makes you happy, Dana. But now that we've mentioned your weird vacation habits, let's talk a little bit more about you. So we now have a better sense of how the project functions and how it happens in the world. But then something else happens in the project, which is also not a given, because you were dealing with spaces and areas that were either past dictatorships or spaces of atrocities, spaces of collective traumas. But then you decide to take the method that you developed for gathering visual data and visual relics and phantoms, and then you turn your camera to Israel. And I want to talk about that because I think the reasons for doing that were different, not the same as going into spaces that were spaces of such physical harm and collective trauma for the Jewish people and for many other communities around the world. What happened? Why did you bring that perspective into Israel as well?
Well, even that is a bit complicated, so I'll try to answer it using various perspectives. First of all, I think I always took photos at home. I think the question is, why did I took photos of phantoms in Israel? Yes. I think the turning point was the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin back in 1995, and after that, especially during the second Intifada, the second Palestinian uprising that started back in October 2000, it came to my mind that I must frame, the Israeli reality. My point of view was, of course, already focused on presenting political events, but I wanted to do it in an abstract way. Mm-hmm. I wrote somewhere that I believe that art works that are political abstracts might be more valuable because their message is not too clear, and some of the viewers can find themselves and deal with politics, because normally when we turn to art, we use it as a form of escape. Mm-hmm. And after Rabin assassination, I figured that there's no way for me to escape anymore. So in any case, I started to take photos in Jerusalem because there was this feeling of responsibility, or if you wish, the burden of history in a way. But it didn't start this way. It started at the Hebrew University campus of Givat Ram, because when I was studying photography, we were asked to go back home and come back after one semester with a project, with something that is complete. And for me, going to the Hebrew University campus in Givat Ram was like going home, And as opposed to all the locations in Europe, these places really felt, that I'm familiar with. But after I've been working on these Jerusalem series of the campus for about 3 or 4 years, I understood that there must be something else that I need to know about the Israeli memory culture. And this is how it started to evolve.
Yeah. So here we're looking at 2 images that are also included in the exhibition from the category Disturbing Remains. And these are images of Lifta you've taken in 2018. What can you share with us about these images?
Well, first of all, Disturbing Remain is a name of a conference that I took part in many, many, many years ago, actually the same year that this whole project started in Mauthausen concentration camp. This was the name of the conference. And there, of course, they used the term in order to discuss how can we keep all the disturbing remains, how can we actually, assure that they won't fade away. But mm-hmm. This concept really suits places in Israel, because as I mentioned before, the memory culture is not indicative. You cannot walk through the village of Lifta and see signs, explaining to you that in this house used to live the village doctor, or this was the elementary school, or nothing of that exists. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you have these romantic, amazing facades of places that used to hold evidence for people living there, and they're vanishing, and then you can enter a place like that and encounter this red sofa. And this is exactly how a frame starts. Because when I look at it, it seems so, I can't even begin to describe it. Is it irony or cynicism, or what exactly goes on there, you know? And also on the other side, because in this other side of the pool, I mean, I was always debating with myself, what would I like to put in the side? Because you can see this this guy who's probably, I don't know, I mean, I don't know him, of course, but is he drunk or ill or sad, or I don't know. And of course the dog that is taking care of him, and there are many people watching it, but these are all relics of other times, you know. And so for me, this is where a frame starts.
That's incredible. And, you know, I was really struck by the image on the right with the man lying on the floor, because, you know, I've shown an image with a man standing in Kiev, but there are not a lot of human remnants in your images. Even though we're going to be looking at some people momentarily, I just want to be clear, there are 100,000 images in the project. In the exhibition, we have, I believe, over 100 images that have been included, and there's not a lot of people there. And when people are being introduced into what you're doing, they change the frame in a very meaningful way. And intentionally, in this exhibition, we were able to include many people, and we're going to see them now, because now, before we kind of dive into that, another example, you spoke about the home, you spoke about Givat Ram, the campus. So this is an image from the archival collections on campus in Jerusalem, and from the Natural History Museum in Jerusalem in 2016. And here, what I find striking is the move indoors, the way you find relics indoors, which is another thing that we don't see a lot of in the project, as it focuses on those architectural environments. But here, the relics of animal living, but also
this is a personal trauma, because I think my first visit to the Natural History Museum, like many children in Jerusalem, was somewhere back in the 70s. Maybe I was 6 or 7. And I remember entering this museum and, you know, staring at these this whole process of taxidermy. What is this? You know, how do animals get into this shape, and still being uncertain whether or not the animal is alive or dead, you know? And so, and then of course my mom had to send me to a summer camp in the Natural History Museum. And over there, we did some surgeries, you know, to birds. And I was so shocked. You know, I was so puzzled that I'm still scared. But I mean, what amazes me about this place, you know, not many people visit it today.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like getting intimate with these scenes, you know, is really upon touching history. And again, these places have smell. It amazes me every time I enter, you know. And of course they want to renovate it, they want to change it, and I feel like this person, you know, is like clinging into the past and saying, please don't do it, you know. This is such a unique place, but they keep on changing all the time. So at the moment, for instance, that I have a lot of phantoms that when I took them, they were already phantoms, but at least they existed. Now they're not there, you know. So now they're not there. For instance, in Givat Ram, this amazing building of the National Library is about to be evacuated in about, I think, 6 months, and getting close to the Israeli Knesset in this fabulous new building. But I keep on thinking, you know, all about these millions of books that are going to be transported, you know, to be driven to a new location. And this place means so much for so many people who wrote their PhD there, and, you know, sort of imagine how we call it sushi, because the books are moving in this rounded circle, you know, until you get them in the second floor. There's no more sushi, you know, in the campus of Givat Ram. Done.
Oh my God, I mean, I'm still somewhere in. You went on a summer camp where you had to perform surgeries on animals for taxidermies. I'm still there. I'm still processing that. You know, in Tel Aviv, we didn't do that really in summer camps. And wow, I salute you.
Let me remind you, you are younger. You are much younger. Well, and in my age, you know, we also read these horrible tales by Ami and Tammy, you know. This is
Hansel and Gretel. Yeah, well, that's a topic for a different conversation. But I'll just note, it's interesting to me how you kind of turn nostalgia on its head and you use it as a tool within the scope of this project. Because it's not, nostalgia in your case does not just remain on that very personal troubling experience, but it also speaks volume to a particular history of a place and how is that history captured and how it is being remembered and by whom. And when we were in early stages of working on this project, we took a conscious decision to, in each of the categories in the exhibition, to exhume some of the ghosts of your own practice and include images that you've captured during the 1980s onward in black and white. And we kind of included them as a way to say something also about the phantoms of your own work. So let's talk about reevaluating your own work in this light to bring it into the scope of the phantoms and then include works, earlier works from way beyond, before you started thinking through the phantoms, bringing these images and these moments into the framework of the phantoms, which is what we've been doing with this project. And how does it feel to look at these images now as part of this project? And as you're going to be talking about them, I'm going to be sharing the images from these categories so that people here can experience that with us.
But Rotem, maybe before you do that, I mean, I really fell in love with your encounter of this particular image on the left of the TV man. Maybe you will be willing to join with us these few lines that you wrote in the opening of your text, which I believe is really so interesting. And this would serve as an introduction, if it's okay. I mean.
Sure. I can say a few words about this image and why I found it so intriguing. So it's going to be an art historical moment, right? Because we're going to be employing some art historical tools for this. So if you look at the image on the left, only titled Hebron 1985, Hebron 1985, look at this man. Look at how he's sitting. Look around him. See if you can start note some of the details around him. We see a man sitting outside. He's framed by the bricks below him, by the wall against his back. We see this screen net door. It looks a little bit like there should have been another wall there. I look at this image and I keep thinking that I'm looking into someone's home. And the man is sitting next to this really old TV. And there's another TV here and it's emptied. And there's a bottle here, and might be half empty or half full, depending on your perspective. And he is sitting down. He has only one sock on and one shoe on. And what he's holding here is, when I look at this image, I think it's a sock. And I think he's going to, the way his foot is laying there on the floor, I feel like he's going to be putting on his second sock. And I keep thinking that I'm invading into someone's world, that there should have been a wall there, but there isn't, that it's an intimate indoor scene, but for some reason it happens outside under the scorching sun. And you can see the sun is scorching because you can see how bright the white is. And I was struck by this image and I spent a lot of time with it because it doesn't make sense on any level. It doesn't. And I find it's astounding that you were able to locate this image and that you were able to gather him into your records. And I think he notices you because I think there's a little bit of a grin there, and he's like, I see you.
Well,
there's an I see you moment there.
As opposed to many other situations in which, you know, I document people, and if they don't like it, then obviously I remember it because it was a while ago. I don't remember precisely, but I can tell you that certainly I troubled him because this is probably why the other socks is still, and he's staring at me back. But at that point in time, it was still okay to take photos. Today, you obviously have to ask permission, and it's not so common, you know, to just do it as it was almost 40 years ago, I should say.
Yeah.
I think that what strikes me, there are many discoveries of many black and white and negatives that were stuck in my archive, for many, many years. And when I find them, in many cases, I'm shocked by the fact that I was probably always interested in the same issues. Because when I took Hebron, as you mentioned before, I was looking at this person on the one hand, but then again also at the settlers housing in the middle of the city with the army taking care of the settlers in the midst of Hebron. And, this struck me then as much as it does today. So it's the same questions, basically.
Absolutely. And I want to be conscious of our time. And there's another image that I want to put up here. And I think this will be the last one that we'll see together. And the reason why I want us to talk about this is because I think it encompasses a lot of the things that you were just saying. Can you talk to us about this, about these two perspectives?
Well, first of all, it's less than 50 meters away from here to the right. So I'm still very, very, very close to the place where I grew up. And I think that's what makes Jerusalem so important in my life, because I really travel quite a lot. But at the end of the day, I always come back here. And I come back here, meaning I come back to the memories. So my grandmother, as you can see, she was a dressmaker and she was a hard worker. And everything that she did, of course, everything she managed to gain was using her hands all the time. But at the end of the day, she was carrying a very, very strong and probably amazing trauma that I would never be able to grasp, because they came here almost 40 years before this image was taken in 1943. So in 1933, 50 years before I took this image and many years before I was born. But when they came to Israel, everything was still alive and kicking back in Adborna, in the small village where she came from. But then again, in one point of time, at the eve of Sukkot in 1941, each one of her members of family and also my grandfather's family, they were all murdered. And I think that the fact that she managed, to roll on, and this is why I like this image so much, because first of all, it doesn't show her as the beauty queen she was. And she was an amazing lady. And my mom, when she sees, she always wants to kill me, if grandmother would have seen the way you saw, but this is how I remember her. This is my childhood, this is the place where I get the perspective of the smells and the sounds and the way she was all the time energetic, about her life, whatever the situation was. So in a way, yes, I admire her, and this book and this project was basically devoted to her and to my grandfather as well. At the end of the day, this is how we do closure.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dana. And now I'm going to hand it over to Shayna.
Super. Thank you, Rotem, very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone who joined us today. I have many questions. Please continue to send them into the chat, and I will try and get to as many as possible. When I was looking through these photographs to prepare, I thought about a comment on the website of talking about memory culture, because I think there's this really interesting tension, and you address this on the website a bit, in that on one side there are so many memorials, right? There's a sort of big official memorials to all sorts of things, whether it's museums or terrorist attacks or car accidents, but there's also a very intense pressure to clean up the scene of violence very, very quickly, right? So for example, after a terrorist attack, if you've ever been to any of these sites in Israel, within hours, right? Not even days, hours, it looks like nothing has ever happened. So I'm wondering, how does this work fit into these sort of contradictory tendencies? Is it an intervention, right? What does this say about Israel's sort of, binary, or however we want to call it, memory culture that is both obsessively remembering, but also wants to forget very quickly? And either of you feel free to comment.
Rotem, start, please.
Okay. I think the project, part of what makes it so compelling is precisely what you're talking about, Shayna. It's precisely the way it navigates these two ends between desperately wanting to remember and finding the relics of what had happened, realizing that it's very complicated to find them there, but also utilizing tools like nostalgia, as we've been talking about, as a political tool, or at least, at the very least, as a conscious tool of action in the landscape. And I think part of the point that Dana is making with this project in specific relation to Israel is that these ghosts, even though they might not be recognized, are continuously haunting these landscapes and continuously define them. And it's such a visceral experience. You've mentioned terrorist attack sites in Israel. As like a person who grows up in Israel and had the privilege of experiencing these moments in time, which were very, very painful, when you walk past those sites every day, when they're a part of your daily routine, they change something in your body when you walk next to them, even if you realize that or not. And a lot of the project, the way that Dana shaped it, speaks about those moments. Going into Lifta and not being able to find the village doctor, going next to Cafe Moment in Jerusalem and feeling cringed every time you walk past by it because you know what had happened there, even if it's acknowledged or not. And that's part of the reason why this project is so important, because it brings up those moments, but also importantly opens up the possibility for viewers to become participants, to contribute their own memories of the sites, which I think is another hugely important point.
Thank you.
So I
Donna,
can maybe very quickly add to your question. You know, Rotem mentioned one of the images that I took in a coffee place in Jerusalem. This was, as I mentioned before, at the second uprising. And I was there still with negatives and black and white photos, as opposed to later on when it all moved to digital and also to color. And I had to take it, you know, I had to choose what it is that I want to bring from the location, from the site. Again, a site of horror. Is it the way the coffee place looked after it blew up to the sky, or just the atmosphere that was apparent there, you know, in Jerusalem during those days? And for many, many years, I was certain that this is something that I will never expose. And at the end of the day, I decided to take 2 or 3 images from that series and include them in the Zionist phantom. Now, of course, it's the question in Berlin. When I wrote about Berlin, I used the term transparent commemoration. So how do you want the commemoration to look? From which materials are you going to build the site, the location of the memory? I use the term transparent commemoration because in Berlin, in many cases, they use perspex or glass, things that you can go through and not look at if you prefer. In Israel, the engravings are always on stone, you know, so they're really apparent. Once you have this notion of a terror act or a terror bombing that occurred, it's there to remember. It's like the burden of history on this very traumatic city. And indeed, it makes life rather difficult. I mean, I agree with you, Rotem, that when you walk through the streets of Jerusalem, it could be a very traumatic event, but the question is, how do you go about? And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying in the project to combine, you know, at the one hand, again, it's documentary photography. I never change the images. I never edit them. And certainly I do not take any images in a studio. It's always in the street. It's always photography, sort of art, you know, a street art in a way, documentary photography. But then again, if it depicts horrors, then how do you do it? And again, my solution is to try and do abstract. So you can be in a very scary site, but at the end of the day, most of the viewers will say, what is it? It doesn't seem, you know, I don't know this location. And for me, it's a good image. If they don't immediately understand where it was taken and it's not direct, political, you know, overt, then probably it's better.
Okay. I wanted to ask a question about inspirations, right? We got a comment that your work has echoes of Joseph Beuys, or Beuys, I think.
Beuys, Joseph
Beuys,
Beuys,
right? The famous German photographer, which I definitely see. And sort of, how do you, what are your artistic inspirations, if you have them? And how does this work, and this is maybe a question more for Rotem, fit into the larger landscape of Israeli art, and especially Israeli photographic art?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of gestures that I do. Sometimes they are clear and written. Like in this particular book, there's at least one tribute, but there are many tributes in my mind all the time. These are normally to the masters of photography, people that, to my understanding, changed the word of photography. Sometimes they came from the Dada period or the constructivism, because they're really amazing photographers whose point of view was really different. And in many cases, I admire them. But it could also be the case with Zander, or, normally it would be anywhere between photography or cinema, because these are my sources of inspiration. But at the end of the day, it could be also, something that I read. It could be an essay, it could be a research essay or literature, or that echoed. I devoted a whole complete exhibition to Black Milk, this very famous poem by Paul Celan, who was later, he took his own life after his horrible experience in the Holocaust. And it was for me really important to give the exhibition this name in particular. Of course, it dealt with the Holocaust, but still, at the end of the day, I do a lot of tributes. And I think it's important to, not in particularly to, if I was to choose between the German artists that I admire, and there are many, this was probably more referring to the Atlas by Gerhard Richter than to Joseph Beuys, but I like his work. Although I believe he's much more conceptual than I am, and much more brilliant, but that's a different issue.
So just to say something, I was going to say something quickly about photography in the Israeli context, which, as I said that, I realized is not a possibility. But photography has a very unique place within Zionist and Israeli creative expression, which actually goes back to pre-state times in Israel and Palestine, because photography was one of the most effective tools for the nascent Yishuv, for the Jewish Zionist community that was being groomed and developed in Palestine, to share its image with the world, but also to praise its own image and its own national culture to itself. So photography was always very present within Zionist and Israeli visual culture. And it was a very important tool for later artists, because it was an expensive tool, but in a way, much more accessible tool for artists to be able to document their work, their lives, and the places around them. There's specifically within Israeli photography, there's a huge space for documentary inspired photography, because a lot of the photographers were engaged in journalism photography and utilizing photojournalism, especially in 1970s onward, utilizing photojournalism as a way to talk about the place that they're in within the context of the art world. So all of those different threads of activity have really come to define a very unique photographic space in the Israeli context. And I have tried to respond to that quickly. I have so many more things to say about this, but definitely Dana's project walks in between those different poles of activity, between wanting to document and, of course, realizing there's no such thing as straight documentation. You can never just document a landscape. There's always conceptual choices involved. There's always a particular perspective that is being employed, and bringing all of those worlds together.
I 100% absolutely agree. Just to add that I think this was your PhD, Rotem, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for the book.
Like the
for
600
a reason.
books, like 600 pages that I've wrote about this.
Yeah, but I mean, this process of nation building back in 1948, you know, because this is a really young state at the end of the day, and back in the 20s, 1920s, 1930s, there was this process of nation building, and of course, photographers had to be part of that. So many people would say that this was the case in many other places in the world as well, but the Israeli case was really unique, and you're right, Rotem.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I have so many more questions, but unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to encourage everyone to join us tomorrow at noon for a workshop where we'll be using our senses, our thoughts to sort of work through some of these issues in a more hands-on way, which I'm really, really excited about. That's from 12 to 2. Again, I want to thank everyone who made today happen. And I want to thank our sponsors, the Leonard Bernstein Festival, of course, the Consul General, and all of you for coming. Have a wonderful day, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
so
Shana.
much,
Thank you
everyone.
very
Thank
much
you.
for everything.